freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 365 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearmsauctions.com, where you set the price on guns, ammo, and accessories. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Our theme today is countering anti-gun propaganda. And our guest today is Erich Pratt. Erich is the Senior Vice President for Gun Owners of America, which is a national grassroots organization representing more than 2 million Americans dedicated to promoting their Second Amendment freedom to keep and bear arms.
And Erich has just authored an important new book titled Firing Back: How to Counter Anti-Gun Propaganda and Become a Better 2A Activist. Welcome to the show, Erich.
It is great to be here. Thank you both for having me back.
Well, this book is, we'd have you back anyway, but this book really got me excited, and I was so eager to have you on and dissect it, dive into it. But I was also very honored that you asked me to write one of the little reviews on the back. And so thank you for that. And thank you for this book.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for the quote on the back for reviewing it. I greatly appreciate that.
Absolutely. My honor. So the title of it, I think, is so interesting. It's perfect. But in this day and age where we have to, parse and sift and be so careful about our phraseology because, lest we incite a riot or an insurrection by saying, the word firing back, right? Okay, we're just firing back with words. Calm down, people. But I love that, you were bold with this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, the whole idea of firing back, as you said, we're talking about words and really it's countering the myths that are out there and trying to educate people with the truth. So that's the core of the book.
And speaking of truth, your family has lived through this whole reality that governments can, will, and do turn on their citizenry. They become overbloated, they become tyrannical. And, maybe a couple of years ago here in the United States, people could easily go, psh, oh, pshaw, right? That'll never happen. Well, we're seeing it everywhere now. But your family has personal experience with this not so very long ago. And it even, it related to disarming the citizens and what the government can do once citizens are disarmed. Can you kind of dive into that for us?
Yeah, this is something my family has lived through. My mother is a native Panamanian, and she's from a political family. True fact, my great-grandfather on her side signed the Declaration of Independence for Panama in 1903 when they broke away from Colombia. And my mom's uncle, so my great uncle, won the presidency in the 1960s. And so, of course, that's an exciting thing for our family, right? Well,
yes.
He was only president for a couple of weeks because a military coup took over the presidency, and it remained that way for a couple of decades. And, the point is this, and this is the point that I develop in the book. having free elections is not enough. You know, the Panamanians had a saying, this land is not fertile soil for tyranny. Now, this was before the coup, right? But see, that just shows it's not enough to simply have this belief in freedom. Even having a constitution like they do that's based upon our constitution is not enough. You've got to have firearms. The people have to be armed, because if the government has most of the guns, you're always going to be this close from tyranny. And that's what the people of Panama discovered, that if you lack the deterrent to tyranny, you become sitting ducks. And so this is one of the major themes of the book, that guns are a deterrent to any dictatorship. And that's an important message, I think, that people need to understand today.
Boy, absolutely. There's a comedian out there. I think he would categorize himself as a comedian, JP Sears. And I don't know if you even know who that is, but we've enjoyed his humor videos for quite a while. He used to be sort of like a yoga Zen guy who would make fun of, like health kicks or whatever. And since all of this COVID lockdown and mandates, he has become very highly critical through his humor of, the oppression of the government and these sorts of things. And he just this past week kind of outed himself. He said, look, I'm going to show you guys a video that I did years ago where I was very anti-gun. And I have evolved. I now understand. And it was because of personal experience. It's I guess, unfortunate in a way that we have to wait until it is on our own doorstep before we have that awakening, many of us. But I think that we can learn from other people's experiences. And when you share your families, and JP shares his kind of, learning arc, I think that helps other people understand that, okay, what I thought yesterday doesn't necessarily define how I have to think and behave and speak tomorrow. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's kind of the old adage that a conservative is a former liberal that got mugged. And you're right. A lot of times people do have to, almost suffer the consequences of their thinking, or some sort of tragedy that helps them see that the futility of their thinking. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that. And really, that's what my book is aimed at doing, is presenting truth so that people don't have to get mugged, so that they can put on right thinking. And one of the challenges is for people who are already into guns, just to realize that you can have your whole man cave full of guns. That doesn't make you a gun rights activist, because a gun rights activist is not only fighting for your own right to keep and bear arms, but you're also fighting for everybody else's and the next generations, because our rights are under attack. So, it's really important to be involved. And so, there's a message there for, even for the people who I know all this, and, I believe all this, and I got tons of guns. But then my challenge is, okay, then what are you doing to protect that very important right?
Yeah, back in the old days, we, when I was a kid, we used to have guns and everybody kept quiet about it. We didn't talk about our guns, mainly because we didn't want them to get, stolen. But nowadays, I think with women coming into the field, the way they are coming in, they talk, right? And they talk, and they
He's such a brave man.
Are you going to smack him?
I know, right?
Get ready to, yeah. But that's a good thing.
We're social creatures. I think that's what. Can I interpret?
Well,
we're social.
That's what he's trying to say. Yes.
Yeah. But it's really good, because I have seen, just since we started this radio show, I have seen a big difference that when women get involved, they socialize, and that's networking, right? That's true. Guys we didn't do that back then. Maybe the younger generation is, but we didn't do it. So, I had a gun shop in the 70s, and I go, it's not my problem. It's not my problem. How stupid I was, And my dad was super active in fighting for gun control and against gun control. And he, he couldn't get me to budge on it. I'd help him hand out flyers and do stuff, but I feel bad that he didn't get to see what we have become, what Cheryl and I have become, that we are fighting the fight. But people do have to get off their sofas and talk, go to events and voice, talk to people. So
Absolutely. Well, I love that we all are at least second generation, maybe third generation. We don't really know that much in our family beyond Danny's dad, but second generation of people who are really, walking the talk and putting our money where our mouths are. So, and talking about, the whole idea that, people might have a gajillion guns, or maybe they've bought their first gun and people are like, oh, yay, all these millions of first time brand new gun owners. And now they're going to understand why we, fire back with words and fight the fight. And that doesn't happen automatically, as we're saying. And a lot of that is because of the tidal wave of misinformation that comes at us every single day from politicians, from, whatever you would call mainstream media. And, for those that are not maybe tuned into how the other side uses phraseology and how we have this war of words out there, can you kind of, unpack that a little bit and say, why was right now the moment that you chose to write Firing Back?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, by God's grace, I've been in this fight for over 30 years. And like you all, I'm second generation too, because my dad was fighting this fight for decades. But also like you two, I understand how the schools and the mainstream media, they're just pumping out misinformation. It's very frustrating. And a lot of that is why I had a burden to write this book, because I see how good people get frustrated by the big media and they despair because the mainstream media has such a wide reach. But my encouragement in the book is this: focus on what you can control and don't get frustrated by what you can't change. And so, again, my book gives practical ways that people can make a difference, but really it all starts with making sure that people know the truth. And that's why the book spends a good bit of time shooting down many of the anti-gun myths that people frequently hear, things like the false ideas that the United States has one of the highest murder rates in the world. False. Or the idea that we can create safe zones by banning guns in certain places. False. All these are false claims. We hear them all the time. But what I do is I give people the truths that will help them counter that misinformation, because it's important that people know gun control has failed everywhere it's been tried. And guns save lives. Those are two themes that keep getting repeated over and over and over again in the book. And I think that's very important, two pillars of a message to understand.
It's crazy to me that we have such a rich and detailed and, categorized history of what happens when the government disarms the citizenry. And even in current times, we have the example of Venezuela, we have the example of Australia, and somehow people still seem to have this veil over their eyes, and they just keep saying, yeah, but this is the United States, it can't happen here. Or
but why can't it happen here? That's the question. It can't, because we have a constitution to protect us, and we lose that, we've lost it all. But they don't go that far. They ought to go to the next thing. Just that's far as they go. They don't look. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have answered that.
No, that's
It's frustrating to me. It is really frustrating, because we see that. Look at what a year ago, Venezuela. Look at it was in every news ever out there, and we just following it. We're following it. We're in this. We're in their footsteps right now.
Well, absolutely. I believe we are. And it terrifies me to think that we are on what I'm calling the Venezuela timeline. And, I feel like everything's been sped up towards tyranny through the COVID years. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that have been shooken awake, whatever the right word is, to say, oh, wait a minute, maybe it can happen here. And that could be the silver lining through all of this, but you give some secrets to the best way that advocates of the Second Amendment can verbally fire back. Can you divulge some of those now without giving it away and people feeling like, oh, well, he already told us everything. So,
Right. Well, one thing that's critical, and this is where the book starts, and it's a foundational truth. We have to start with this. Everyone, all people, they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. And that's what our Declaration of Independence says. And those words are a real game changer. See, our rights are not given to us by the government. They're not privileges. Our rights come from God. And that's why we can't compromise. We can't support waiting periods or gun bans or gun-free zones. And that's why at Gun Owners of America, we're working so hard to repeal gun control. It's no wonder that our founding fathers said that the Second Amendment, or in the Second Amendment, that our right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, because these two concepts go hand in hand. If our rights are given to us from God, then government has to keep their hands off those rights. And really, it's only with this as a starting point that we as Second Amendment advocates can forcefully argue that all gun control is ineffective, that it's unconstitutional, and really that it's dangerous and shouldn't be supported at all.
So when you say that our rights are endowed by our creator, you understand that in a certain way. We understand that in a certain way. We're practicing Christians. But what about the person that is, not religious in any way, or, atheistic in their thinking? That particular argument, how do we help them understand that, it however they would like it phrased, it still is not for the government to give or take away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like having a toolbox. You got a bunch of tools, and not every tool always will be used at any particular time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're dealing with people, you kind of have to assess where they're coming from. And you're right that that argument may not, some people may not be ready for that argument. Where I find that that's the most useful argument is people who already consider themselves to be with us, but they support little compromises here and there, that they're willing to give ground. So, they're pro-gun, they consider themselves pro-gun, but they might support a background check, or they might support this or that. And that's where I think this can be very useful, is to help them understand that, look, our rights, there's either a line in the sand, or there's not. Because if really these rights are just privileges from government, then in the end, we could end up like Venezuela, just little by little, chipping away. But on the other hand, if our founding fathers are right, that our rights do come from God, then there's no negotiating. The government cannot infringe on these in any way. And that's why we do draw such a hard line, and we say, we're not going to, you may take it from us, but we're not going to voluntarily give it away and say, you come to us and say, we want to ban 200 guns. And we say, oh, how about we just limit it to 20 and we'll call it a day. That's like a thief putting his gun in your ribs and saying, give me $100. And you say, well, how about if I just give you 50? And, and I
act
won't,
like you weren't robbed, right?
And act like, exactly.
Yeah, and you give them the 50, and then they come back and down and want the rest of it right afterwards.
Bingo.
Right.
That's and sadly, that has happened a lot, as how people have tried to defend the Second Amendment, and that's a losing proposition. And so that's why I think this argument is really, really important for us to grab a hold of it and start there, that our rights come from God, just as the founders said.
Well, Eric, I agree with everything you're saying 100%, because I've seen it. But back in the 70s, like I said, I had a gun shop, and they didn't have background checks. We just had 4473s. They fill out the form. And many times the ATF come in and tried to accuse us of falsifying on these forms. And so when the background check thing came, stupidly, I thought, well, this is good because it protects me now. But it didn't. But they find ways to make, we want to be responsible gun owners. We want citizens that are legally, that are legal abiding citizens to be able to carry a gun. But they trick you into thinking, well, we'll just get the bad people off the streets and then everything will be okay. But really, the people that they're infringing on are the good people.
Right.
The bad people already can't have a gun. A felon
That's right.
can't own a gun. And so, but they trick you. They make you think, well, this is a good law. This is a good deal. But then, and once that law is in, it's in. It's in. There's
Yep.
nothing you can do about it. So, everybody think, oh, background check. What's wrong with a background check? Well, come into my store and sit at the counter and watch it when a person wants to buy a gun, can't buy a gun, and he's not a felon. But he still can't buy a gun and has to go through 60 days of fighting to get a gun.
That's an infringement.
Right.
Yeah, and in some cases that can be deadly if it's a person who, especially like a woman who needs a gun in an emergency because she's being harassed by somebody. And there have been actual very tragic cases where women have died waiting through a waiting period.
Right.
So yeah, and whereas, as you just said, those background checks never stop the criminals from getting guns. Never since the beginning of time, bad guys have gotten their hands on rocks, clubs, spears, whatever was the technology of the day.
And the weird thing is that the people that do a background check that can't buy a gun and are denied a gun, that would have been a perfect tool to weed out the criminals, and they don't go after them.
No.
Right.
They don't do anything to them. So how does that not, that tells you they're just wanting to control guns.
Yes.
Oh,
For sure.
it's very frustrating.
Well, and then that same kind of thought process, there's so many people that say, well, a gun-free zone, it helps make our children safe at our schools, right? And, wherever else they've come up with these gun-free zones, and you always have to use air quotes. You can actually pick up your hands and do this when you say gun-free zones, because it's only a gun-free zone until somebody brings a gun in. And who might want to bring a gun into a gun-free zone and misuse it? A bad guy.
Right.
Because he's betting that all the responsibly armed citizens, the law-abiding citizens, are following the rules. So, that is one of the things you talk about in your book, is that gun-free zones are actually the opposite of what is sold to the public. It's sold to the public like the safest place on earth. And yet, what have we seen over the years, Erich?
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's unpack this. The truth is that guns are used in this country 16 to 100 times more often to save life than to take life. And that was revealed by a CDC study during the Obama administration. But, as you're pointing out, a lot of people don't understand this. And so you see officials trying to ban guns all over the place, creating these safe zones, gun-free zones. I'll give you an example where this just totally fails. Hospital in Darby, Pennsylvania, like many hospitals around the country, it's a gun-free zone. And of course, the assumption behind gun-free zones is that guns are too dangerous for the average person, that the gun-free zones will keep the bad guys with guns away from the area, as you were pointing out, Cheryl. And if there's ever an emergency, the assumption is the police will be there to protect them in time. Well, all those assumptions got shattered when a deranged guy who actually got a hold of several illegal guns, he was a prohibited person, was still able to get several guns. He went armed to that Darby hospital. He walked, ironically, right past the gun-free zone sign with his, a gun on him, shot and killed a person, and was actually attempting to kill more people. Police say he was actually intending to kill lots of people. But thankfully, he was stopped by one of the doctors there. Now, there's kind of another irony there, because the doctor was a concealed carrier, but of course he had himself secretly ignored the gun-free zone sign. think a lot of people think that way, that the only way you're ever going to find that a person is a good guy is carrying illegally is if he has to use it in self-defense. Well, that was the case with this doctor. And so he shoots and stops the bad guy. And, thankfully, the police, rather than condemning the doctor, praised him for saving countless lives, which shows that there's still some sanity left in this world. The doctor wasn't charged, hallelujah for that. But here's the point. Guns save lives. And again, all the gun control in the world, whether it's gun-free zones or background checks or whatever, you can dream up the restriction. They never stop the bad guys from getting guns. And so, once again, those two themes, guns saving lives, gun control failing. I mean, those are just two themes that are repeatedly hammered home in this book over and over again.
I look at a gun-free zone sign as the same as if I carried a sign that you had to put on your head that would say, I'm carrying this much cash with me and I'm unarmed.
Oh, wow.
It's no different, right?
Wow.
Because then the criminal could decide who has the most money and go after that one instead of going after you.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. I see those gun-free zone signs and it's just, how does anybody think that means anything?
It is crazy that we buy into that in the ways that we do. And I actually had not heard the Darby, Pennsylvania story before. And I think that we need to share those kinds of stories more often so that it shows people how true and how often these things happen. And there's an organization called Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, the DRGO. And, I love how vocal they are and that they use statistics and, they are out there speaking, because so often we're told, well, doctors are absolutely against guns and, they're healers, so they would never, use a firearm to harm someone. Well, this doctor, he wasn't trying to harm someone. He was trying to save other people by stopping a threat. And even that distinction, I think people get, too wrapped around the wheel. And the statistics help them. If you look right now, when they try to say there's all of these incidents of gun violence, right? Well, what they'll do is they'll take this doctor's good action and they'll put that in that pile of statistics as gun violence, right? Instead of helping us see that, no, that was stopping violence of any kind, right?
Yeah, and when you look at the statistics, it's really dramatic. When you look at mass shootings, 90% of them occur in these gun-free zones. This gets back to what Dan was saying. It's almost like they're actual magnets attracting the bad guys. And when you actually hear the things that they write and they say either before or after their attempted assault on people, you find that actually they did specifically target these areas because they were gun-free zones. So yeah, they're a bad idea because it disarms people, and they're a bad idea because it attracts the bad guy to say, hey, here's a bunch of sheep who can't protect themselves. And thankfully in the Darby case, there was a doctor who surprised them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Eric, how many gun shops do you know that's been robbed by one person?
Yeah, to ask the question is to laugh, right?
Right. Because how many? I mean, have there been where they've raided a store? Yes, but for a guy to in our neighborhood, there's several shops that's been armed robbed. Okay, our gun shop's never been robbed. I wonder why. Is it because?
Well, and if they're going to do it, they probably do it at night, right? When nobody's
but I'm talking
there.
about where you're walking physically,
Exactly.
rob somebody. So
because they pretty much know that they're going to be met with resistance that they don't want to be met with.
That's the same as the subliminal free zone, right? Free gun zone.
Gun-free zone,
the bakeries and stuff like that, little mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
So I mean, just look at it that way.
Yeah, the gun-free zone. When you first hear it, you think, "Oh, are they giving away guns there?" That's
what it should mean,
zone, right?
It should be what it means.
All right, and so what do you say, Eric, to people who have this idea? And I don't know if it predated the Obama presidency or not, but he was so fond of saying, you know, mass shootings and gun violence doesn't happen in other nations, and I forget the qualifier that he used, but industrializing it, whatever, right? He's trying to say in polite society, right? There are
That's not how Obama sounds.
no, okay.
No.
I won't even try to do an impression of anyone, but so people that insist that other countries out there where the governments have already disarmed the citizens, well, those are the safe places, right? They're civilized. They're above all of this, what are these ugly tools that you Americans are so in love with, right? What do you say to people that have that idea so firmly locked in their brain that they won't just look at the reality of the places we've talked about, Venezuela, most recently Australia? Go on with
Yeah,
it.
this is one of the greatest myths that's out there. The idea that our country is so much more dangerous than other countries. And of course, they're saying this because, we are the world leader when it comes to being armed. So, they're trying to make this equation. We're dangerous because of all the guns, and we're far more dangerous than any other country. The truth is, when you actually look at murder rates worldwide, we are not even in the top 100 murder rates in the world. I mean, truly, there are more than 100 countries on this planet with higher murder rates than we have. And guess what? Those countries are countries like Venezuela and the countries we were just talking about that have much stricter gun control than we do. So all these countries with their higher murder rates than we do, the top 100 countries with higher murder rates, they all have stricter gun control. So tell me how gun control is making them safer. See, here's the sad truth. When countries disarm their citizens, they're actually put in a very dangerous situation. We've been talking about Venezuela. But in the 20th century, I mean, there were several countries that disarmed their people, and then it was followed by horrific massacres of defenseless people. And, we're talking about countries like Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, Turkey, Rwanda. I mean, this is the chief reason that our founding fathers inserted the Second Amendment into the Bill of Rights. They wanted to prevent oppression like this, and they wanted armed people to be the final check against a tyrannical government. So that's the truth. It's worked well here. But where guns have been taken away, that's where they become sitting ducks for tyranny.
And I agree 100% with you. And let's just use the United States as an example. Let's go to the states and cities that outlaw guns, that are they have the toughest ban laws. Where is most of our crime coming from? It's coming from those cities.
Yes.
Chicago. I mean, look at Chicago. You can't walk into the store and buy a gun in Chicago without the Pope blessing you, right? Right? But where is the highest amount of crime? Chicago. Arizona.
Yeah,
you can walk in and buy a gun in Arizona without, same day, walk out with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the crime rate in Arizona versus Chicago?
Exactly.
But they say, well, Chicago, the guns are coming from other states. We got guns coming from other states, right? So there it is right there. I mean, but that's
and of course, that's always a blame shifting argument. Oh, the guns are coming from other states. Okay, well, let's just assume for a second they are. How come those other states don't have the same crime problem that Chicago does or Baltimore does, right? I mean, so in other words, it's not the guns that are the problem, because the guns aren't causing the problem when they start in those other states. They only become a problem when they wind up in a city where not only do they have strict gun control, but inevitably you've got DAs that are throwing criminals back on the street. They're not prosecuting criminals. I mean, so there's a whole lot that's contributing to it. Right. It's no wonder that they're far more dangerous there.
Right. So can I go with a hypothetical question, Eric, if you don't mind?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
If they took away all the gun-free zones in the United States, all of them, do you think that there'd be less mass shootings?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, as we were talking about earlier, 90% of them now occur in gun-free zones. So
Right.
you would still possibly have some, but a far, far drastically less of a number than we have today.
Right. Well, keep in mind, where guns are completely illegal in countries, they still have mass shootings.
Right.
So that I'm just saying that, you know, it all comes together. If you just look, it all comes together.
Well, that would mean that we would have to have a public that engages in critical thinking, which I don't believe they're even
Right.
teaching in schools anymore, right? And logic, like understanding the flow of logic. I was talking about it, the logic train has fallen off the tracks, and
Yeah.
sometimes I don't know whether I should hold responsible in my mind the politicians and the media, because I do think they are definitely in collusion together. It's become more and more evident nowadays than it was not that long ago. Or if I should hold responsible in my mind the public for just gobbling it down like a baby bird without even thinking about what's being said and these examples that we're talking about. But I think that a book like Firing Back, if people, read it, I know a bunch of people are going to buy it, but they might just go, okay, I got it, I'm going to stick it on the shelf. If they'll actually read it, now they're responsible for the information. And that's what I'm hoping for, because there's such good and rich and valuable information in here. And among those involves our mutual friend, Maj Toure, who we just absolutely love. You mentioned Darby, Pennsylvania. He's from Pennsylvania. But he's been saying for years that not only is gun control racist, but all gun control is racist and has its roots in racism. You discuss this in chapter 7. Can you kind of walk us through some of the reasons why that would be true?
Absolutely. Honestly, we could spend an hour just going through example after example to highlight this. But I mean, just look at our early concealed carry permit laws, which were applied in a discriminatory fashion in our history. I mean, if you were white, you would be approved. If you were a minority, you would inevitably be denied. And a classic case in point, of course, is Martin Luther King Jr., who even after his home was bombed in 1956, he was denied the right to get a concealed carry permit by the state of Alabama. And I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many examples like that. But what's really exciting about that chapter 7 that you just mentioned is that it answers a common objection that people sometimes bring up, and they'll say something like, okay, besides the American War for Independence, are there examples where average people have used their guns to resist tyranny? Because some people have this idea that, that could never happen today, in a day where there's nukes and things like that. You're just not going to have people using guns to resist tyranny. But the truth is, there's a lot of examples, and primarily coming from the Black community. One of my favorite examples is hearing former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice talking about how her dad would arm himself and patrol the neighborhood at night when she was a kid. And he would do this with other dads on the block. And they did this because the Southern police departments were looking the other way when the KKK would show up to terrorize the neighborhoods. And in one case, not in her neighborhood, but another one, Blacks had stockpiled military weapons, which were, of course, the so-called assault weapons of the day. But anyway, they used those rifles to shoot out more than 80 cars of the Klansmen when they showed up to murder one of the leaders in the NAACP. So guns were very useful in defending innocent lives against officially sanctioned abuse. And, this gets to what we were just talking about. Gun control has never been about safety. It's about control. And that's certainly one of the lessons from the civil rights era. But so is the truth that guns are a huge, huge defense against tyranny, which is, again, exactly why our founding fathers wanted the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights.
Boy, exactly.
You look at that, you say, okay, how how could we go against the government with their nukes and all their jet fighters and everything else? But then I look back in World War II, when Germany took over France and took all their guns away, and how those people fought in pockets to help declare independence. And they gave them quite a fight. And I would rather give quite a fight than to be a slave.
Absolutely. So we need to start wrapping up. And the final chapter of your book is actually a challenge to people to use the information that they've been made responsible for, and put into practice the activism you discuss in the book. Can you kind of tease that a little bit for us?
Absolutely. I would say this, no matter where you're at in life right now, whether you're a student or a parent, a professional, whatever it is, this book will show you how you can make a difference. Perhaps the most powerful thing you can do as a form of outreach is to take a friend who's not pro-gun to the range. I mean, my family has done this. I talk about this in the book. It makes a huge, huge difference. We've seen people's views change in doing that. But I think one of the most powerful things you can do to safeguard your Second Amendment rights is to join forces with other people, so you can multiply your efforts as you put heat on your legislators. Of course, the best way you can do that is by joining a Second Amendment organization. And, that's one of the things that at Gun Owners of America, we specialize in. We make it really easy for people to take action. When you're getting our emails or our mailings, I mean, in less than a minute, you can send one of our postcards or one of our emails, or you can sound off on legislation that affects your Second Amendment rights. Just a quick example, in 2004, the Feinstein semi-auto ban was sunsetting, and Democrats were trying to reimpose the ban. Well, we deluged senators' desks with an unbelievable avalanche of postcards, and it worked. We were able to help solidify opposition to renewing the ban. And one Senate office said that it was the GOA postcards that killed the semi-auto ban. The National Journal that year said it was GOA that torpedoed any chance of renewing the ban that year. But in all honesty, it was the loud voices of grassroots members. So, see, those are just a couple of things that people can do to safeguard our rights. I mean, there's other ideas there in the book, but, taking people to the range, joining forces with GOA, sending emails. I mean, those are two great ways to help safeguard our liberties.
That is fantastic. And it really does matter that we speak up to our legislators. We are constantly being told we live in a democracy, a democracy, a democracy. Well, we are a government that is supposed to represent the people,
Yep.
right?
A republic, yeah.
Republic. And how can our representatives represent us if we're silent all the time? If we
Right.
never tell them what we want them to do and say to represent our side of the story.
And
This
the other
book-
side is a lot more noisy.
oh man, they never take a
No.
nap. And it seems like we have hit the snooze button way too many times. So this book will definitely help people understand better how to verbalize the things that they already believe in their heart to be true, and help them understand the importance of speaking up and verbally firing back. As we go out, Erich, tell folks how they can get this book and continue to follow all of the amazing work that you do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. People can follow me on Twitter at Erich M. Pratt, and that's Erich with a CH. If you go to our website at gunowners.org, I encourage you sign up for our free email alerts. And yeah, people can get a copy of the book there in our bookstore at gunowners.org. And of course, we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. So follow us on all those platforms. But Gun Owners of America, we're putting out a lot of good info. And those are just different ways that people can get this information. And I hope people will do that.
Fantastic. And not everybody's is going to have a personalized note like mine does.
Oh, you're flaunting it.
I will treasure. Thank you so much.
Erich, thank you sincerely for everything that you're doing and your organization is doing. It's a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you both. Thank you for what you're doing too. And thanks for having me on, and thanks for educating people, because I know you guys are doing this constantly as well. And that's greatly appreciated.
Well, thanks so much. God bless. We will talk to you soon.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You know, he's right. You know, people just joining the organization is not enough.
Right.
You got to get out there
at
and you got to
least
talk.
join. Right. At least join.
All right.
But
You got to get out there and you got to engage. You've got to. You know, you can't just sit on the couch and let somebody else do it, because it's not going to get done.
Well, and if you thought that maybe sitting on the couch and advocating or abdicating that responsibility would get it done, let's look at what's happened over the past, how many years? 50?
Well, let's look at last year.
Yes.
I mean, that was enough right there. And too
That's-
many of us sat us on the couch.
That's true. So we've already had that experiment and
Yeah.
we see the results. How about we have another experiment in you listening,
Right.
you
And
watching,
me.
personally being involved.
I enjoyed history in school.
Mhm.
It's probably one of my best subjects that I really enjoyed.
Mhm.
I collected coins, so I related to other countries and stuff like that. So world geography, the whole works. And I collected coins from Panama.
Mhm.
Very interesting, because a lot of the coins were made in the United States for Panama. And I had no idea what he just told me.
Yeah.
So guess what I have to do?
Right.
I have to figure it out.
Yes.
Because it was in the 1960s. I was alive then. Why don't I know about that?
I don't know. And we've known Eric for so many
Right.
years. And I only learned about that by reading this book.
Right.
And I feel like if I was him, I would lead with that constantly. Look,
Yeah.
this is what happens. And how do I know? Because it happened in my own family.
And my lifetime, I mean, it's
Yeah.
different about his generational stuff, but
Mhm.
in 1960s, this is kind of now. Well, not now for my generation, is
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
We were there.
Yeah,
This,
absolutely.
Kennedy got shot, all that stuff's happening, and I knew nothing about Panama.
Yeah. Yes, there's so much that we just need to stay curious, and we need to invest our time in learning from, walking the footsteps of people who have come before, so that we give the best opportunity to those who maybe they're not even born yet, but their footsteps will carry on
Right.
for us. But I cannot say enough amazing things about the information that you will find in this book. It's not overwhelming. It's in small enough bite sizes that you can absorb kind of each chapter as you go. He's got footnotes.
Footnotes. Foot
Footnotes.
news. I'm
Foot-
foot news. Everybody got a
Footnotes
foot news.
galore. So you can go, well, I don't know if I believe that. Well, he showed you a footnote, so you can go check it out for yourself. So anyway, I want this book to fly off the shelves. I want it to fly out of Amazon,
And we want it to fly out of your voice,
the
that you're
store.
spreading the word.
Yes, fly out of the bookstore from Gun Owners America. This book can really make a difference in your personal life, and that's where everything starts. And then you'll talk to your friend, and they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends. But all right, we've got to get on out of here. So thank you so much to our amazing friend Erich Pratt for all that he does and for taking all of this time to be with us. Thank you to our amazing listeners all across the world. Wherever there's internet, you all are engaged and you are curious and you're hungry for the information that our subject matter experts present here. And that's everything. I mean, we can have this amazing conversation with Eric over dinner, but to have it here where we can share it with so many people now, again, you can take that into your carpool and discuss it, or around the dinner table and discuss it. And that's really where the change happens, for the good. So thank you for that. And if you want to watch any of our past episodes and you like the video version, then go to the YouTube, our YouTube channel, and please click to subscribe and get notifications. You can go to Gunstreamer. which is kind of the gun-friendly version of YouTube, or the OpsLens smartphone app. And if you like to just listen to it without the audio, then you can go to our website, gunfreedomradio.com, click the on-demand tab, and binge listen to your heart's content. All of the episodes we have there. Click the guest tab. You'll see photos, bios, and links to all of the works of all of our guests we've ever had on. It is a tremendous resource that has built up over the years. And when you spend time there, we don't hate that.
No.
So what are we going to do until next time, Mr. Todd?
We're going to pray for our country, pray for our leaders.
Absolutely. How about the ones we don't really like too much?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we'll do it. Sure. Why not?
Maybe especially
Yes.
for those people that we don't particularly like, right?
I don't have any hate in my body today.
That's good.
There's no one I
We
don't,
should never hate.
but just don't mention names and all.
All right, we'll be
But
good.
I haven't thought of anybody that I really don't like right now.
Well, that's good. All
Yeah,
right.
it's my,
You haven't been watching the news much, so that's good.
I've
All right.
taken away from the news a little while.
All right, everybody. Until next time, be good to each other. Have a great week, and God bless.
Bye-bye.